I don't expect any more to come. Well, welcome to today's stream on Basso Continuo. We will have a quick look at what Basso Continuo is, how to read the numbers that are written out in figured bass, have a short recap on which figures usually relate to which kind of chords or which kind of musical figurations. Then we'll have a look at how to play them actually on instruments, especially on period instruments. Then we'll have a look at how stuff found their way into the more modern kinds of analytical tools. And that's about it. So, Continue is a sort of accompaniment that was mostly used during Renaissance and Baroque epoch for ensemble works, not for solo works. For solo works you had written out music sheets like today, but for accompaniments of pieces where you had an orchestra, a choir, or just a small combo of instruments, the composers would just write down a bass line and write numbers under the bass notes which indicate which chord actually to play over that note. Typical instruments of that so-called continuo group, the group of accompanying instruments, would be the cello, which would always play the bass line, or the viola, di gamba, which is a sort of bigger cello with frets on its fingerboard and with more strings, so it was capable to actually play chords like 3 and 4 and maybe even 5 stop chords. Another typical instrument would be the harpsichord or the regal, which is some sort of portable reed organ. Then there is the lute family, some sort of guitar. Especially interesting the theorbo, which is like a big lute with two necks, like one regular neck and one long neck with low strings. So much for the short introduction. Reading the numbers isn't that difficult actually. You would usually just take the current bassline note and add the diatonic intervals above the bass note. Often some numbers would be omissed if they were very obvious, like the third and the fifth over the bass note, and sometimes even the sixth. So common omissions or common notations would be, if there's no number on a note, it means you have to play the third and the fifth. If there is just a sixth, that means you play the sixth and the third. And since the third is very, very obvious, you would just not write it down. Similarly, the 2 stands for 2 for 6, and 4/3 is abbreviated for 6/4/3. There are some conventions like the positioning and the doubling of chord notes are fairly deliberate, and the chord itself change with the beat of the main meter. And there is also very rarely the number 0 or the annotation TS as in tasto solo, which means don't play a chord over this very note. So for example, if we have an E flat and the numbers 2, 4, 7, we add the second note, the fourth note and the seventh note above E flat, and we get this chord, which would translate to a diminished D chord over a bass note of E flat in modern chord symbols. A 3/5/8 would be just the third, the fifth and the eighth over E flat in the scale of E flat, of course, because that's what the key signature says. Occasionally you will see accidentals in front of these numbers, which means the corresponding degree has to be altered. So for example, we have here 2, 4, 6. The second degree over E flat is F. The fourth would be A flat. but if we raise it by 1/2 step, it becomes A. And the 6th degree is C, resulting in a F dominant 7 chord with E flat in the bass. So, knowing that, we can already construct a chorded accompaniment, and I've prepared this example in Sibelius because entering notes in Sibelius is definitely faster than in Lilliput. Alright, let's turn those all into rests and get started. So the first note is an E flat, and no numbers mean it's a 3/5 chord. So let's add the third, that's a G, and the fifth, that's a B, and a B. And to make it a tetrad, we can double any of these tones. I'll just double the root for now. Alright, next one, 2/4/7. Second over E flat is F, fourth is A flat, the seventh is D. Then we have 3/5/8, so G is the third, fifth, eighth. Here we have a 6, which is short for 3/6, so we add the third above G, which should be a B flat, and the 6th over G, which is an E flat, and maybe double the E flat. Okay, next one, A flat with 5/6, which is short for 3/5/6. So add the third, add the 5th over A flat, and the 6th over A flat. Next is B as 3/5 chord, so the third and the 5th, and maybe double the root for now. And then we have E flat as 3/5. So the third is a G, the 5th is a B flat, and we'll double the root again. Maybe we take the whole thing, put it down an octave. Okay, and on the next one we have the exact same numbers in the next two bars, so let's just be lazy and copy paste. This bracketed 6 means you could ignore the 6, then you would have a 3/5 chord over G. Let's just do it for heck's sake. So the third above G is B flat. The fifth would be this one, and then we have a little variation here. Okay, I'm gonna do the rest a little bit faster because the principle should be clear by now. So add the third, E flat, add the 6th, E flat, double one of the notes, and maybe the third this time. Okay, same here, add the third, which should be E flat, add the 6th over C, which should be A flat, and double one of the notes, maybe this one. The next one is B flat, but with a 5, and the 5 kinda indicates that the composer would like to have the 5th degree in the top soprano voice. Then just add the third, and well, in order to avoid parallel 5th here from A flat to B flat, we will instead double the 5th. Okay, 2/4/6, so add the 2nd, which should be a B flat, the 4th, and the 6th. Alright. Turn those into breaks, into rests. Okay, 3rd over G is B flat, 6th over G is E flat, and double one of the notes, maybe the lowest one. Okay, E flat, 3rd over E flat is G, and the fifth is B flat. And as we see, it's just the same chord as before, so I'm just gonna make it half a note. Okay, here we see we have two numbers on one chord, so each number is actually 1/8 note. So 6, 4, we add the 6 over B flat, which is G. Then the fourth over B flat, which is E flat. Okay, and then a 5/3 chord on the same note. So third and fifth. Fifth. Alright, and then double one note, why not the lowest? Okay, and as we see, it's still the same as before, so let's just tie the whole thing. Okay, sixth note, 6 means we have to add the third and the sixth, which would be F and B flat. Okay, next is a 3/5 chord, so the third over E flat and the fifth over E flat, and double one note. Alright, the next one is a fifth chord going into a sixth chord. So 3/5 above D is just F and A flat, and 3/6 means F and B. And well, let's double on the bass note here for once. Here we have a 7 chord, which means 7/5/3. So add the third, which should be an E flat, the fifth, and the seventh. Okay, 3/5/6. So the third over E flat, 3, 5, 6. Okay, the next one is a 7 chord with an unaltered third. So the unaltered third over F is an A, but this way. Okay, then add the 7th over F, which should be an E flat, and the 5th over F, which is a C. Okay, again a 3/6 chord, third is B flat, and the 6th is E flat. Maybe double the G just for the heck of it. Another 3/5/6, third above A is C, 5th and 6th. 3/5. Yep, a sharp in the bass is completely ignored. You just add whatever chord is written on the numbers. So the bass note doesn't matter. It can have any kind of accidental. You just do whatever. Oops. Wait. There we go. You just add whatever number it asks you to add. Okay, so turn the rest into rests for 1. It's just 3 more bars. No, that was a misclick. Okay, 3/5. So D and F. 2 for 6. Second over it should be a B flat for 6. Actually, the same notes as the previous chord. So just make it half a note. Okay, this is a 5th chord. So he actually wants a D in the soprano line, and then the F is maybe not so smart because we're getting parallel 5th here a bit. Yeah, it's a bit hard to solve, but I'll leave it at that for now. I think the notes I forgot. Actually, here should be an extender line. I think I made a let's take copying it. And we should have an extender line here too, which means that the chord stays for more than one beat. So G is the third above E flat, then the fifth and the sixth. Okay, a 7 chord, so we want a 3, 5, 7 here, which is 5, 5, 7 and 3. 2, 4, 6. A plus sign on the 4 means it's erased 4. It's just another way to write sharp 4. So the second should be an F. The fourth over E should be an A. But it's raised by half a step, so it's actually not an A flat, but a regular A. Okay, and the sixth above E flat, which is a C. Okay. Well, I think the rest is the same as before, so I'll just put it in notes. Okay, that's F. With this one here. Okay, 3, 6. 3, 5, 6. So C. And this is just a 3-5 chord. I'm not gonna put a chord above this note because the main meter is in quarter notes and there is no number here, so that's an indication that this 8th note does not need its own chord. So 3rd and 5th and 3, 5. 3rd, 5th and 6th. It's okay, 3rd and 5th, but with this guy here. Okay, and then we arrive here, regular 5-3 chord. And if we listen to it, that should sound fairly reasonable. Right, that worked out well. And the written out version is also in our PDF that I'll be publishing later on, with all the omitted numbers also written here. Alright. Now, lots of numbers correspond to chord inversions, so we're gonna have a look at which numbers actually relate to which inversion. Let's start on triads. The normal root position is indicated by 3, 5. The first inversion, where you take the bass note and put it up 1 octave, is indicated by 6, 3, with the 3 being omitted. And the second inversion is the 6-4 chord, because you have the 4th on the bottom and the 6th on top. So the 4 replaces the 3rd. with 7 chords. You have the 7 to indicate the root position. First inversion would be the 6-5 chord. Second one would be the 4-3 chord, and the third inversion is the 2 chord. And you can maybe remember it by seeing that the dissonance is noted and everything else is skipped. So on the first inversion, the dissonance, the second, happens on the 5th and 6th degree above the bass note. On the second inversion, it happens on the 3rd and 4th degree, and on the third inversion, it happens on the 2nd degree above the bass note. So these numbers are being written out. Oh, sorry. Yeah, maybe I muted the microphone because the Sibelius sound was coming through my speakers, although I'm on headphones. But I can replay it, no problem. I have it here in Lillipond as well. By the way, if you click this link here, it will take you to a very nice recording on YouTube where you can actually hear the continuo being played by an organ. Very softly, but it's audible. Alright, let's go back to the chord inversions. So after skipping through the basic inversions, each of the degrees can be altered if the note is not contained in the actual diatonical scale or in the key that the chord is noted in. Let's take the root position. If we are in the key of C major, but we want an E flat on the 3rd step, which is not contained in the C major scale, you have to indicate it by a flat sign. So accidentals without a number always refer to the 3rd. Same if you want a raised 3rd, then it's just a sharp sign. And in some occasions this sign and the sharp sign are the same. For example, if you are in F major and wanna raise the 3rd, then you can either use this one or this one. And sometimes you will also come across a plus sign, which again is the same as the sharp sign. The accidental on the bass note does not matter. So if you have a 3-5 chord, you just take the normal diatonic 3rd and the diatonic 5th above the bass note. Well, I suppose we don't have to go over every single example because they should be self-explanatory. Sometimes you will come across a crossed 6, which also means raise the 6. It was just faster to note than writing a sharp sign and a 6, at least for the composer. Back then paper was scarce and so was ink, and they hadn't invented printing yet, so they tried to keep it short. Alright, so possible alterations. Well, that's for reading. One other thing you will come across are suspensions. If you see a 4-3 over one bass note, it's just a suspension 4 that releases into the 3rd. So in the piece, this chord could be a regular root position 3-5 chord, but the 4th degree is tied over from a previous chord, for example, and you would note that by 4-3. Same goes for 6-5, and of course you could combine 4-3 and 6-5, making it 6-5 suspension releasing into 5-3. Other common suspensions are 7 to 6, because the 7 is definitely a dissonance in terms of baroque harmony. Anything smaller than a minor third is a dissonance. 9/8 means you take the second degree but go up one octave and then arrive downwards at the root note. And you can combine the 9/8 and the 4/3, making it a 9/4 going to 8/3. Then there is also the suspended second, written as 5/2, because a single 2 refers to this one, to the 2/4/6 chord. So suspended seconds are always 2/5, and they release towards 5/3, which is the difference between the ninth suspensions, which always goes down, and the second suspension, which always goes up. Another phenomenon are passing notes, where the bass stays the same, but the chords over it form some sort of line. And that's when you will encounter the 2/4/7 onto the 3/5/8. And if the opposite is the case, so your bass note is actually forming a line, but you don't want the chord above it to change, then you use an extender line. And whenever you see a series of numbers like 6/7/8 or 7/8, it always means there's some sort of melodic line going on. That's an indicator. And lastly, the anticipation, where one note of the following chord is played a bit sooner than the rest of the chord. And that's, well, where you will commonly see stuff like 6/7/8. And sometimes there will be a 3 noted, which indicates that the fifth step may be omitted for some reason. Well, so much for theory. Let's have a look at how, based on this knowledge, people actually play continuo. So on most chorded instruments, continuo is played in tetrads and following the rules of 4-part harmonization, which is mostly about avoiding parallels, like parallel 5th and parallel 8th, hidden parallels and the outer voices. And, well, there are a few exceptions, especially if you are playing the harpsichord, because on the harpsichord you are sometimes forced to play chords that have more than 4 voices, and in that case parallels are allowed. Actually, there is some treatise by some famous guy called Georg Muffat. I think he was a pupil of Fuchs, whose book on counterpoint is being recommended a lot on comp. And he wrote in his very treatise that it's okay to have parallel 8s in the harpsichord, or that it's at least permitted, it's not forbidden. It's okay to play in parallels to the melody instruments, but if possible don't do that in your highest voice, but hide it somewhere in the middle of your chord. On triads it's recommended to double the root, and if that's not possible because it would create parallels that are not permitted, then you double the 5th, and if that's still not possible you double the 3rd. But the 3rd is never doubled if it's a leading tone, because if you have 2 leading tones in a chord, they both have to resolve. So you will have 2 7th to 8th degree in your chord, and that's a parallel 8 for sure. Again, on the harpsichord it might be okay, but for example on the organ, on the lute, on the regal, better not. Otherwise try to minimize the motion, so don't jump around all over the place with your chords, but try to keep them in the same range. Some specific rules for continuo, aside of the general 4-part harmonization rules, are stay below the melody line. If it's possible, don't play along the melody of the solo instruments. That's their job, and your job is just accompany. figured intervals that appear in the melody may be omitted. So if we go back to our example from Bach, let me find it really fast. For example, here we have a 5/6 chord, and the 6th degree over the A would be an F. And as you see, the melody already plays the F, so we could actually just go ahead and skip the F in the continuo part and just play this chord, because the 6th degree has been already played by some other instrument. Alright, some specifics of keyboarded instruments. Of course, if you're playing the organ, you should choose an adequate registration. So just, if it's a very soft piece, you shouldn't use the loudest sounds that you have on your organ. And if it's not a very fast piece, you shouldn't be playing like crazy fast arpeggiated chords all over the place. Also, in order to keep it simple, you often just play along the bass line in your left hand and finger the chords with the right hand. As an example, I have taken the first 4 bars of a trio sonata by Telemann, which sounds very nice on its own already. Let me just go ahead and quit Sibelius, because I don't need it. And it's hogging my MIDI space. So Lillipond is falling back on generic MIDI for some funny reason. Just gonna fix it really fast. Alright, give me my MIDI synth. As you could see, it sounds okay, but might appear a bit empty. So if you want to play along the figured chords, it would sound something like this if you were just to write out the chords. Often you don't have to do it, because today's or modern day editors have transcribed the chords for you already, which makes these kind of pieces even easier to play, because you just have to read the notes and play along. And their harmonization should be fairly correct, so there shouldn't be too many bad parallels in it, or ideally none. Although there are some, like here, parallel 8 between melody line and a middle voice of the continuo. That's okay. Here again, and stuff like that. But that's permitted, that's okay. And especially for bigger ensembles, like a full orchestra, where it doesn't matter so much that you alone as the continuo player or the continuo group has to provide the whole harmonic fundamentals of the piece, it's okay to play such an easy realization. But if you're in a smaller ensemble, it might sound a bit generic and empty at times, depending on what instrument you are playing. So on this sample I have first used a piano sound to play it, I hope, and that should sound fairly okay. Oh wait, that's still the previous sample, I need this one. Then again, if you use an organ instead of a piano, which is much closer to the historic period instruments, I'm using a reed organ because there's no good flute organ sound in my MIDI instruments. Well, that kinda works too, but if I were to use a harpsichord to play this very part, it wouldn't sound that nice. It would sound like this. And my problem with that is, well, yeah, I'll elaborate on this page. So the harpsichord has a very unique kind of sound. It's a plucked instrument, and every key you strike is always the same volume. And the tone of every key you strike decays fairly fast. So the problem is, if you strike a long note, then you have a huge fall off. So by the time we arrive at this rest, the note is barely audible. And especially on slow pieces, you have these kind of huge holes between each note because the tone just decays way too fast. Therefore, using this realization to play on the harpsichord is not the optimal way to play it. Instead, you would want to use a lot of arpeggios to, well, fill in the gaps that would occur when you just hold out chords. And on the harpsichord, if you want to play soft notes, you would just play a slow arpeggio over and over with a very few notes. If you play a fast arpeggio over a few more notes, it's actually something close to a forte. If you're just holding on long notes and let the tones decay, it's essentially a diminuendo. If you accelerate during your arpeggio, it's, well, basically a crescendo. And if you hit chords at the same time, it would come close to sforzando. You can purposefully use higher notes to play a chord or lower notes to make it sound more dark or more bright, which is all about, well, the knowledge of the harpsichord player apparently. So on the next example, I've written out how a typical harpsichord accompaniment would look for this very piece. And in order to realize it, I first looked at the melodies to see where there are maybe crescendos in the melody or decrescendos. For example, on the beginning where the oboe plays is da 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 da. I assume the oboe player would do a slight crescendo on the starting note and go back, and when he has this two sighs, he would do a crescendo into the accented beat and then again go back, and so on. And to reflect that, I would do a fairly big arpeggio on the crescendo and would hold out the chord on the decrescendo to let it decay together with the oboe. And when he does a crescendo again, I would use faster notes, and when he's reducing his volume, I would use fewer notes. And the result sounds like this. Seeing many bars? Many bars of what? That's just 4 bars of music on 4 voices. But as you see, Here on this long note, the oboe has a fairly large crescendo, so I do a lot of arpeggios in the harpsichord voice to actually support it. And on the decrescendo, I hold out the arpeggiated note over 2/8 and not over every single eighth note. Well, on fast pieces, I actually don't have to do it because yeah, well, that's what written out arpeggio looks like. Stuff like arpeggios going up first and then going down, it's just not possible to write it with arpeggio signs. No, it's just 128. It's four beams. No, it's 5 beams. It's not bars, it's beams. Yeah. Faster notes means a bigger crescendo. Therefore, 5 beams. Okay, let me just put in the realization of these ones here, if I find it. Yeah. Okay, so the fourth movement of the same piece is in Allegro. In Allegro, you don't need long and big arpeggios in order to maintain the volume. So it's okay to just take the basic realization of the editor and maybe add your own, your own very tweaks in order to follow the melody better or make it more interesting. Oh, there we go. Uncomment and recompile. Oh, actually, let's first listen to it without the realized harpsichord voice. So it should be my fourth file here. Right, I think in this example it's pretty obvious that the trio sounds very empty without a continuo in the middle. So I'm gonna uncomment the continuo part so that it's also being played. And then I'm gonna explain what I did in this voice in order to make it adequate for the harpsichord. Okay, for once, I've tried to make arpeggios whenever there is a accented beat. So on the first and third beat, I do arpeggios. On the first, I try to have more notes. On the third, I try to have a bit fewer notes to make it less accented. And whenever there's an unaccented beat, I'll just do a chord with a very few notes. On this descending fifth sequence, I just took the freedom to play along the runs of the oboe to make it more harmonic. For example, instead of just playing A and C and F sharp, which the oboe already has, so I can omit the F sharp, I play in parallel sixth to the oboe to make it sound nicer. The same here, parallel sixth, and the figured sixth above the G, which should be an E, is already in the oboe voice, so I can omit it in the harpsichord voice, and so on. Alright, so much for realizations. The next we want to talk about is how the kind of figured bass found its way into our today's analyzing tools for harmony. I think everyone is fairly familiar with the Roman literal analysis, where you just write in Roman numbers what scale degree you are on and so forth. And figured bass numbers are often used to indicate the inversion of every degree of the scale you're on. You just use the figured base number and write it next to your Roman literal, and that's it. And you don't use slashed notation, you just use sharp and flat signs and maybe the diminished sign, but that's it. So in our example, we have C major. Our first chord is the first degree in root position, so no number. Second chord is D minor, second degree in the first inversion, so there is a 6. Third one is E major, so it's the third degree with a raised G sharp, so a sharp third. Next one is A minor, 6th degree. Next one is D minor, but the D is sharp and the F is sharp, so it's a D diminished chord. The 7th chord in its third inversion, so it's a 6/5 chord. The sharp root note in this case is indicated by this sharp sign in front of the Roman 2. And then we have a suspension 6/4 to 5/3 on the 5th step on G. And then we arrive at C major with a 2/3 suspension. I think to be correct, I actually had to write the 5 above the 2. So it's 5/2 going to 5/3. And, well, if you have a score that has a figured bass with figures written in it, it should facilitate writing the Roman steps or the Roman literals to it, as the inversions are already given. So in this example, I just took the baseline of the Telemann sonata, and whenever there is no number, it's just a root chord, so we are in G major. A G in its root position is obviously the first step. C in root position is the 4th degree. B in its first inversion means that's also a G major chord. So it's the 1st degree in its first inversion. A as a 3/6 chord means it's F sharp diminished, which is the 7th degree in its first inversion. Then it's the same all over again. And then we have G with a 7, so it's just the 1st degree with an added 7, a major 7 even, to be clear. Then this is E minor, because the notes are G, B and E in its first inversion, so it's the 6th degree. Then this is a passing note. This is E minor in its root position, so 6th. Still E minor, but again in the first inversion, as the bass tone has changed, but the rest of the chord has not. Okay, next one is A major, and this one is also A major, but with an added G in its base. And both of these are a second dominant to D major. And the next bar is obviously a cadence in D major, so this is a secondary dominant onto the 5th step of D. First note in root position, second note in its 4th inversion as a 7th chord. And then we arrive in D major, F sharp, A sharp, D sharp. So the first step of D major in its first inversion. This one is C sharp diminished, so it's the 7th step of D major in its first inversion. D major root, 1st degree. G major, 4th degree. A major, 5th degree. Another A major, and we arrive back at D major. So we have a nice 1-4-5-1 cadence, very typical. Of course, over the time, lots of different ways to analyze harmony has been developed, and so these the numbers on Roman literals have been mixed up a lot. Sometimes a superscript number could mean it's an added note and it's not an inversion. That happens especially often with the number 6 and the number 9. So sometimes it could mean it's an added 6th or an added 9th. Other times when there's multiple numbers, like in suspensions or like in this 6-4 chord, it actually means an inversion. And then there are also symbols taken from the function theory, like writing the degree of the bass note under the chord. So if I have a first inversion, the 3rd is in the bass. So that's why there's a 3 underneath the literal for some reason. And then there's this ABCD thing that I've never heard about outside of German theory. It seems to be some sort of Anglophone thing. Well, and that concludes our today's stream on figured bass and continuo. I'll be open for questions, and we can skip over the appendix if you'd like to. So I've added the full score of each of the example pieces, some without chords, some with realized chords, some reading materials, a kind of helpful chart that tells you which number stands for which kind of chord, like this. And what else do I have? Yeah, and some pieces with fairly simple figured bass where you can try to improvise or write out the chords. La Folia by Corelli, a violin sonata by Handel, and a nice cantata by Bach. Well, no questions? Then that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in, and see you in the thread.